Hello there, my friends, and welcome to the sun-dappled meadows and cool, shady woods of Mount Alamucci Scout Reservation. My name is Carl Zipper, and I run the Backwoods Engineering programs here. I'm here to talk with you folks today about one of my favorite things to do, splicing rope. And specifically, I'm here to talk to you about my least favorite splice. That is what's called the back splice. If you've ever worked with rope, you know that from time to time, at the end of your rope, it's got a tendency to come unraveled and turn into a big, tangled, fibery mess. And if you're a sophisticated individual, the way that you'll deal with that, is you'll put a whipping on the end of the rope. You'll take some little twine, you'll tie it around there so that the rope can't come unraveled. If you're a real sophisticate, like I am, you'll use what's called the sailmaker's whipping, which has another little piece of string coming down this way so that it's even more secure. But if you're a rube, you'll be tempted to use the back splice, because what the back splice does is it takes the end of the rope, you unravel it a little bit, and then it weaves these strands right back down into itself so that the rope can't come undone. There's a big problem with the back splice, though, which is that it makes the end of that rope thicker, and it also makes it stiffer. You can't bend it around so much. And those are both problems. You don't want the rope to be thicker, because then you can never use the rope, in any sort of block and tackle system, if you want to use appropriately sized blocks. And you don't want it, stiff on the end, because that makes it harder to work with when you're tying knots. So, I guess if you're lost in the jungle or something and you don't have any twine to put a whipping on the end, the back splice might be appropriate. But otherwise, save yourself the time and the effort. That said, if you're still watching, I'll show you how to do it right now. We start out, we take the end of the rope here, we unravel it a little bit. I'm working with 3/4 inch rope, so I'm going to unravel it, about 8 or 10 inches. And we start out our back splice by, actually, for the back splice, I usually undo a little bit more. Let's give it a 10 to 12 inches. I start out my back splice by taking these 3 strands and tying a knot with them that's called the crown knot. Why it's named that, I could not tell you, but that's what it's named. So to form the crown knot, what you do, start out by holding the rope so that it's pointing up, and each of the 3 strands is going out, one to your right, one to your left, and one back straight away from you. We're going to start out by working with that middle strand that's going straight back away from me. I'm going to take that, I'm going to pull it over down towards myself, so I form like the head of a little man here. Here's his head, and here's his 2 arms. Like one of those wacky inflatable tube arm guys that you see out in front of the car dealerships. So now that we have our wacky tube arm man here, what we've got to do is we've got to make him very uncomfortable. So we're going to take his right hand, the hand that's pointing off to my left. We're going to take that, we're going to wrap it around down in front of him, and then down in between his head and his arm, so he's like choking his own neck, with his left hand, or with the hand going off to my left. Now we're going to take the other hand, the one going off to my right, we're going to take that and we're going to shove it right through the poor guy's face. And that's how you form the crown knot. All you got to do now is just pull down a little bit on each strand, just pull them gently one at a time to sort of cinch the thing in here. And if you've done your crown knot right, just sort of like is the theme here with most of these lashings, or most of these splices, I should say. Once you've cinched all 3 of them up, you'll have each strand coming out in a separate direction. And if you drew a circle around here, each one of these strands would roughly subdivide the circle into thirds. So that's how you tie the crown knot. My videographer, Rich, was doing all he could to avoid cracking up. So hopefully that means it's a good way to teach it. Once we've formed our crown knot, now all we got to do is finish the splice. And just about every splice that you would form with a 3-strand rope, starting them is different. But once you've got it started, you finish them all the same way. And the way you do that is you take each strand and you fold it down along the rope, and you fold it over the strand directly below it, and then tuck it under the next strand. So this strand here, I'm going to fold it down, it's going to come over this strand and then tuck it under this strand. With a big, big rope like this, especially an old one like this that's a bit stiff, it's a lot easier to make that tuck if you have a tool like this. It's called a Swedish fid. And what you do is you can stick that underneath the strand you're going to tuck, and when you push it through, it forms a nice little trough here that you can slide your strand through. When you tuck the strand, you want to make sure that you're tucking so that the strands cross under each other. And once you pull it tight, they cross under each other at approximately a 90-degree angle. If you were to tuck going this way, they would be a lot more sort of parallel to each other, and that wouldn't be as strong. So I tucked the one strand. I'm going to roll the rope 120 degrees towards me. That brings the next strand that I'm going to tuck into prominence. I'm going to fold it down. It's going to go over this strand and tuck under this one. So let's do that. Put the fid through there. Another 120 degrees. I've got my last strand here that I've got to tuck. It's going to come over this one and tuck under this one. The third strand is always sort of the trickiest to figure out, where it goes, just because there's a lot more stuff in your way than there is when you're tucking that first strand. All right, so now that I've got all three of them through, I'm going to give each one an extra little pull here. Okay. And now to check to see that I've done it right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it, on end here. And if I've done it right, each of the three strands should be coming out in a different location, pointing in a different direction. And if you've got your circle here, your imaginary circle, the three strands should subdivide that circle approximately into thirds. So now that we've got our first set of tucks in, the question is, how many more sets do we do? For a useful splice, unlike this one, you want to do at least 3 sets of tucks so you get full strength. But this doesn't have to, carry any sort of real strength. So, you want to do more than one, but, you don't really need to worry about strength so much. So what I usually do when I'm forming the back splice is I still do 3 sets of tucks. But after I do my first tuck, what I'll do is I'll, take about a third of the strands, third of the yarns, I should say, out of each one of these strands and cut them off. And then when I do the next set of tucks, I'll do the same thing. I'll take another third out. So the splice is sort of going to taper a little bit. And that'll help out with, some of that stiffness that I was just complaining about. But, it's still not a terribly useful splice. This is just, I'm just putting lipstick on a pig here, really. All right, so I've taken a third out of each one. Now, just like before, I'm going to fold over the strand directly below and then tuck under the next one. So let's do that. Over one, under the next, tuck it through at 90 degrees. Roll the whole thing to me, 120 degrees, to bring the next strand into play. Tuck it under. Give it a little pull. And then do the tricky strand number 3. All right. And just like before, I'm gonna give each one a little pull. Check it to make sure, they're all coming out in different spots, pointing in different directions. And now, I'm gonna do one more set of tucks, but I'm gonna take a bit more, a few more yarns out of each one of these. Gonna split what I have left in half here. Cut half of it away. All right, last set of tucks. Over one, under the next. Tuck them at 90 degrees to the strand you're tucking into, approximately. turn the whole thing 120 to bring the next strand into play. Tuck it over one, under the next. Turn it 120 degrees. Tuck it over one and under the next. Okay. Give each one a little pull here. You know, and you can see how it tapers down some over the length of it. It's certainly a lot fatter here than it is on the last set of tucks. Last two things I gotta do before this thing is done. I gotta sort of bed all this stuff in. If I was working with a small rope, you know, like say ½ inch or below, I could just grab it in my hands and go like this. But the big rope is a bit too much. So I'm gonna take my mallet and I'm gonna make some precision adjustments here. And what this is doing is it's just sort of pushing all those strands in, you know, to where they fit best. It's rearranging everything just a little bit, and you can see, you know, how much more level this is and how much smoother the surface is. And now I'm just going to cut off my extra. All right, and the back splice is done. So I hope you learned a thing or two about how to form the back splice. I also hope you learned, you know, that what you really ought to do is, you know, not bother with this and get yourself some good whipping twine and just whip the end of your rope instead, because your rope's a lot more useful. But that said, you know, if you're too poor to afford whipping twine, this will do in a pinch. So I hope you learned a thing or two, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks very much. To make that a little bit easier for me, I'm using this tool called a Swedish Fid. I can push it through here, and it gives me a nice little trough to slide that rope through when I make the tuck. With smaller ropes, you know, a tool like this isn't necessary, but with the bigger ones, it sure makes the job a lot easier.
We're going to cut some audio here and check it out.
Oh, that's the forest fire helicopter. Those old Hueys, they have a distinctive sound. What one of the guys told me once was that those, they're still flying the helicopters that got shot up over in Vietnam. The guy told me that a bunch of them have all patched bullet holes still in the fuselage.
Well, okay.